When President Marcos Jr. came to power, he made it clear that economic development and food security would be the key themes and thrusts of his policy agenda. From his first State of the Nation address to his inauguration speech and a whole host of major speeches he gave to the Filipino people in the past 2 years, he made it clear that economics will be the driving agenda of his administration. Ironically, if you look at the surveys, that's also his biggest weakness. Survey after survey, Filipino people have expressed discontent with his management of inflation, while things are not going as smoothly on the poverty alleviation, food security, energy security front. Nevertheless, the Marcos administration has tried to justify its hyperactive diplomacy as a way to attract investments. For President Marcos Jr., it's important to reintroduce the Philippines and at the same time to get quality investment by partners from all around the world. With the Philippines emerging as the fastest growing economy in ASEAN, there's growing need for the country to also upgrade its infrastructure and also move into more value-added production networks. Not to mention, with growing tensions with China, the Philippines is also diversifying from the Asian power and also consciously presenting itself as an alternative supplier of critical minerals, especially nickel, which is crucial to the development of EV batteries. And not to mention, the Philippines also presenting itself as a potential alternative for packaging design, if not fabrication of increasingly high-end and sophisticated semiconductors. This is particularly important because of fears that there could be conflict over Taiwan. And of course, Taiwan is a major producer of semiconductors. So why not nearby the Philippines, getting more and more share of semiconductor production over the coming years? Accordingly, the Philippines has negotiated a major strategic investment deal with key allies. Under the Japan-Philippine-US trilateral framework, there is supposed to be a Luzon corridor of strategic investments with growing focus on sophisticated manufacturing and electronics production. So far, however, the picture is not as encouraging, whether it's in terms of people's appreciation of the government's economic strategy or also in terms of inflow of foreign direct investments. Lots of sizzle, but not much stake yet. So how do we make sure that the Philippines attracts high-quality investments and moves into increasingly sophisticated manufacturing as it becomes also an upper-middle-income country? What are the things that the Marcos administration should do in order to attract high-quality investment? Does the Philippines need an industrial policy, a made in the Philippines or kind of a version of its own CHIPS Act in order to also enhance the country's manufacturing sector? After all, this country has relied for far too long on low-end to medium-end services and speculative activities to generate growth, not to mention over-reliance on remittances from millions of Filipinos working abroad. In order to understand the challenges ahead for the Marcos administration, how to upgrade the Philippine economy, and whether we need an industrial strategy and a whole package of structural reforms, we have a special guest.
Prof. Dindo, thank you very much for joining us. Marami tayong pag-usapan. In a recent piece in the Journal of Democracy, I tried to describe the Philippines as a kind of a double Cold War game, right? Obviously, the new Cold War between U.S. and China and the effect it has on the Philippines, but also Cold War between the two major dynasties in this country and how the two actually interact. Yeah. So I think that sets the tone for our conversation today, and we'll go probably one by one in these two levels and then how the two interact. But una-una pag-usapan natin, what is your reading of the lay of the land since Marcos Jr. or Marcos II has been the president of the Philippines? What have been the things that have surprised you, and what are the things that perhaps were not so surprising after all?
When you look at 2 years of Bongbong Marcos, or the second Marcos administration, number one, you have to factor in that he was perceived or he was voted into office as a legitimate president by the highest since EDSA revolution. So he brings with his presidency legitimacy, and noticeably from that simple legitimacy, in his first year, it even reached a high of 80% performance rating. So that means people, voters that did not support him, accepted his legitimacy and shifted to support him. What is challenging since his first year is the reality that inflation, what I call the cost of living challenge or even crisis to majority of our people, have not been fully addressed by his administration. So he has fallen somewhat from that high of 80. But we've noticed he has fallen in areas where the other political family, the Dutertes, are quite popular in Mindanao. So
Right.
noticeably, you'd understand that in NCR, given the reality of political environment here, more political noise. But to be weaker in a place like Mindanao, you know that somebody or a group is really emphasizing missteps by this administration.
Right. Right.
Considering for me, given the realities of what we are facing as a nation, we should be working together. Uh, Globally, it's affecting how the economy is, not only of our country, but other countries as well. Security-wise, we see how the world, especially world with that share our values, have been jumping into supporting us, and we have another group trying to say it otherwise. So it creates what we call a political divide in this country. And I believe as we enter the third year and finish off the third year with the midterms and the result of the midterms, I'm seeing that the president might come out stronger if he consolidates his own coalition at the political, at the business level, and at the societal level. And he has that capacity, I feel, more than I'm referring to the Duterte family,
Right.
who seems to be uh, really losing uh, their hold on to power, and they're becoming very defensive and throwing things left and right, which really, for me, reflects what they are politically. Maybe arrogance, simply. Or the thing.
From popular to polarizing.
Yes. And suddenly they have this Marcos that they will always think that they help win. But our data, even during the 2022 election, they never reached beyond 30%,
Right.
the Duterte family. So it took the two of them to win in 2022. So, but they had this thinking that they're the ones that made Marcos win also. So that's something to watch out
Right.
in the next few months, up to May this year. But I see the president consolidating his political base, coalition building, and also with the private sector and even the diplomatic or international community, we see them rallying behind the president because they see this is where the direction is for the Filipino nation.
So you see a positive trajectory for the president in terms of consolidating his political base. But can we rewind a little bit? Let's try to deconstruct what's going on with this whole cost of living dilemma, crisis, whatever you want to call it, because this administration has a very low net approval. I mean, we're looking at net of what, 70, negative 70% in some of the surveys we're seeing. This is not really good, and considering inflation has consistently been among the top, if not the most urgent issue. Ano ba talagang problema dito? To be fair, to what degree is this a reflection of the policies or lack of policies of the administration? And to what degree is this just a reflection of structural conditions, whether external shocks or infrastructure-driven problems and food security problems? So what is a fair score of the administration if you look at the inflation issue, putting the politics aside?
The reality of concerns of Filipino people, consistently, since we have tracked this for nearly 2 decades, it's really economic. Sa Filipino, presyo ng bilihin. And the best way to address presyo ng bilihin is kung may trabaho o kung maganda ang kita.
Right.
So, yan ang realidad sa atin. So, ang kailangan dyan ay may maganda bang trabaho, may magandang kita. And we have had good consumption-driven growth, but I always say it's a catch-up in terms of creating job and opportunities for our people. And I've always argued for an investment job-generating growth. We've been spoiled by remittances, business process outsourcing, but our manufacturing sector, our other sectors should really help generate jobs. We have seen lowering of unemployment, but underemployment goes up. So that means people don't have enough income. And now, externally, you have forces that causes all this inflationary effect on our basic products. People even say we're food poor. Or people will even say a basic commodity like rice is becoming expensive to them. So I'm hoping that with some interventions of the president, like lowering of tariff on rice,
Right.
hopefully the next 6 months, 12 months, we see some effects on that. Me, I've always believed that there's something wrong with the policy where we put value-added tax on power and value-added tax on gasoline. Of course, economists will have a different view, but as a political scientist, I would say this drives inflation to an ordinary person.
And cost of investment also higher, especially in manufacturing. Yeah.
Yes. So why put a VAT
Mm.
on these things? We have to remind people that's a Gloria Macapagal Arroyo administration
Yes.
policy that should have been reviewed because there are taxes that has been passed on through power. Then you put additional 12 pa pagdating sa dulo or gasoline. Economists always say, oh, pang mayaman lang naman yung kotse, no? Gasoline, logistic,
Everyone is affected, yeah.
affected by that. So that adds to all this reality. So
So yun yung structural conditions, the
That's
fiscal policies, the regulatory
Yes.
framework. So you cannot blame Marcos for all of those
yes,
things.
it's just
right?
that, of course, you tend to blame a president that is sitting.
Of course.
But what we notice is that he hits a low of in the mid-30s in Mindanao.
Right.
So somebody's adding to that.
So your argument is that it's part of that is really geographically driven and by extension driven by domestic political frictions. We'll discuss later on. But this is a very important part, Dindo, because the reason I want to ask you is because you are in constant contact with the leading business minds and business sectors in this country more than any one of us. And of course, you're also familiar with the team of economists and the experts and advisors the president have. The two things that have stood out for me, Dindo, is first, one of the things that surprised me is parang medyo kulang sa communications strategy
yes.
ang Marcos administration, which is surprising. So the way I put it is, they won the elections by good poetry, but their prose has not been as so good in terms of dealing with some of these structural problems, which is being blamed on them. Kasi pwede mo naman i-explain bakit ganito ang inflation, hindi mo naman lahat pwede isisis. I mean, the things you explained to me could be done in a relatable way for the bigger people. It doesn't mean it will make Marcos popular in inflation, but at least it will create some cushion in terms of blame game. So one thing that has surprised me, Dindo, is the communication is not up to task. It is great on West Philippine Sea, I would say, on other issues, which is close to our heart. But on these domestic issues, I just don't see a lot of counter. The other one, Dindo, and I want to also get your point on this, is some people are asking, and I've been one of the people quite vocal on this, do we need an industrial strategy? Because I've been in Japan multiple times this year. They have a new semiconductor strategy. Our American allies also have their own America first kind of industrial strategy. The Germans have been the masters and gold standard of this. The Chinese have been moving to the next level. Even the Indonesians, they have been having their own light industrial strategy by pushing for more processing in the mining sector. Do you think there has to be some movement on that front? Kasi kung wala kang industrial strategy, meaning make sure the electricity infrastructure cost for investments, at least in certain sectors, are better, I just don't see how these structural problems will be overcome, even in the next 3 or 5 years. Forget about now or tomorrow. What is your read on those two? Communications, medyo parang nakulangan ako sa pros. And then the other one, should there be a vision, an industrial strategy to bring in those high-quality investments you were talking about to create jobs?
Yeah, I think communication is really a problem of this president.
Surprisingly.
Surprisingly, for a well-disciplined message discipline campaign to where we are today.
And internationally, very effective one also.
Because we have seen how he has properly communicated with the international community, how he has defined the Philippines vis-a-vis the world, especially with an aggressive neighbor, northern neighbor like China. But internally, there seems to be hesitation. And I feel, is it the president? Is it the structure within Malacanang where executive secretary is a chief justice? Maybe he needs, or whoever is controlling the PCO, this needs to help the president. I don't think this should be a problem for the president, but that should be their task, no? To reflect on where the president stands on issues. Because on the West Philippine Sea, there are people who maybe have helped the president make a stand on this issue. And it
reflects.
It reflected well.
Yeah.
And the international community responded to it. But on this issue of economics, just imagine a lot of these pledges being in all this engagement. There should be a follow-up from cabinet secretaries that we should be talking about these pledges have led to this possible investment. This investment would lead to jobs. Constant reminder of people. It will not happen overnight, but you're talking about this is the direction that we're going. But we are not talking about it.
What
Really.
you mean? It should be DTI and NEDA doing more of that?
DTI, NEDA, with really specifics. So it's good. I'm hoping that as things are consolidated with this Office of the Presidential Assistant for Investment, as they
Right.
try to push for what they call green lanes, that fast track all this investment, we might see the last 3 years of the president in a different mode. But it needs to be organized, and that's something that I still find lacking. Maybe the lack of spokesperson to discuss these things in Malacanang. Uh, uh, as compared to what's happening in the West Philippines Sea, whereby we have
Where he's doing
more
very well, yeah.
different spokesperson saying, at least in a way, saying the same thing. At times, people are even confused, but it's going
Very at high level.
high
at a
level
very
of
high level.
discussion. We need that.
Do you think that we need also a fireside chat kind from the president once in a while, telling to the people, I feel you? I mean, he did that in his SONA, right?
Yeah.
We saw a very competent SONA,
Yes.
very good speech. I've heard it from people across the political spectrum. But I was thinking maybe every month he should have a kind of a talk to the
He
nation,
should-
heart
He
to heart.
should have.
Yeah.
I would even say that it's good to go straight to the people.
Yeah.
I mean, you speak, maximize the communication capacity of government with its different broadcast capacity, maximize a one-way discussion. Now you go straight to the public, to the people, and define your presidency. Because on the West Philippine Sea, he has defined,
Right.
and it even reflected on his actions vis-a-vis other countries. No? So we need that from our president. If he needs to be managed that way, that should be the direction, especially as we go into the midterms and enter the last 3 years of his administration after the midterms, because it's really now about foundations should have been placed, and now it's about reaping the benefits of all these
Right.
foundations. And I remain positive, not because of all their actions, but because of the reciprocal actions of the private sector, who are sadly feeling that we are with this president. We're happy to invest with this president because the president has engaged them. I'm seeing this because of the positive response coming from other countries. The interest in the Philippines, more than any ASEAN countries, even allowing our own president to speak in the Australian Parliament. I mean, those things.
Right.
Seeing visits from countries like Czech Republic,
Germany. Yeah. Poland soon.
Poland soon. I mean, you would not even think of these countries taking note of the Philippines. Now you see Canada stepping up, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea. So what you see is really an opportunity for the president and the Filipino people. And we need to see it as a nation also, as a whole. That I wouldn't like to steal the word unity. We need to work together.
Coherence maybe is a more...
Because we need to face the world as one nation and compete there at that level instead of pulling each other down here with political divisiveness. And I'll connect that to the industrial side.
Yes, please, because
the industrial side, I see in these geopolitical realities of interest among the Philippines, towards the Philippines, is a geo-economic opportunity.
to leverage that
to
position
leverage
we have,
that,
yeah.
You're interested on our strategic location, security-wise. Philippines should turn this into a geo-economic opportunities. We can never grow big on manufacturing, but we can focus on light manufacturing, on supply chain. We have our special economic zones ready to accept those kinds of investments.
And with the electricity cost infrastructure
That's why for
issue,
me, we need to address two things. Where for me, a quick solution is really, it's time to start the debate on do we need VAT? Of course,
that's
as
your angle.
it's a revenue source, but it's also an additional 12%. Or in the words of some legislators, maybe the Create More can create incentives that can bring down the cost of electricity. But all those options should look at it.
Yun nga, like we could have a kind of a CHIPS Act, in a sense, just a science and technology research one. We can have maybe subsidized electricity rates. Of course, infrastructure in certain areas. The reason I'm saying is because of that Luzon corridor
Yeah,
that
so
came
it's
out of
again
the.
connected to
Yes, can we discuss
geopolitics.
that more?
You have the port of Batangas, the port of Subic, to maybe Central Luzon, Southern Tagalog, as drivers of, and Metro Manila, of course, as drivers of our economic growth. And there's so much interest towards that. And not only from the point of view of Japan and the US, but even our own private sector has been investing in those areas. So imagine if all those initiatives collide. That's a very powerful opportunity to generate more economic activity in the Philippines. And we have enough. Like you look at Clark, you look at Subic. Imagine if we can generate
Yeah.
investments in light manufacturing. And we have special economic zones from Batangas to Laguna to Central Luzon, and generate some of the supply chain.
And Prof. Danny, what about EV, for instance? We have a lot of nickel, and I think we're also trying to
critical minerals.
critical minerals.
So this is
yes.
an industry by itself. If we
Yeah.
turn our mining industry into not a punching bag of environmentalists who has not been to mining sites and see that
to compare to the alternative.
alternative
yeah.
that you want green economy, but you can never have that green transition if you don't have nickel.
for EV battery
EV
production.
battery.
and- yeah.
You cannot have that green transition if you don't harness or extract copper. Imagine just those two as
Mm.
critical minerals and turn it into a value chain,
Right.
upper value to our people. So I see that the EV vehicle or through battery, the critical minerals, light manufacturing,
Semiconductor packaging
semiconductor,
design. Yeah.
part of the supply chain. People say, "Oh, you're
Fabrication
not
to it.
you're not that high tech." Still, because we're playing that role in maybe 20%, as they say,
Yeah.
according to the Semiconductors Association. Can we increase that role that we
Value
have there?
added. Yeah.
Value add. Then even our own agriculture, if we can only accept the reality that maybe we cannot produce, so what we cannot produce, why don't we import and turn it into agro-industrial production for the local market? Because the strength of the Philippines, you have to accept also, is we're a big market at 118 million people. That's enough market to satisfy a strong agricultural base to service that consumer group. Then you ask yourself also about from this end, what about upskilling our people, no, to move to the next level of business process outsourcing,
Right.
APO, to get ready for AI.
AI,
So a lot of opportunities there, and there are small plays in this already. So we're not coming from zero, but imagine if we will approach this with from a strategic approach. Think long term. Let's have our own strategic vision as a nation that we are at the center of geopolitics in the Indo-Pacific, but can we harness and turn our approach to national security and ensuring economic security by creating enough jobs and income through investments in this country? And I don't see Filipino so-called conglomerates against that because they're used to having investors from different countries. They use
But
foreign
why
capital.
isn't our manufacturing as robust as most of our neighboring countries?
We have what has driven our economy, and even when you look at the top 1,000 corporations in the Philippines, it's really addressing consumption-based economy. Because we got spoiled by remittances that gave money to people and they consume.
So you don't need to create jobs for them to afford it,
Yes.
which is the usual stuff of industrial strategy and
Then you
development.
get this younger mobility of people through the BPO. Again, people were consuming service.
Yeah.
But manufacturing has to go hand in hand. I've always believed that.
Yes.
And there are key plays that we can really make. When we speak of manufacturing, don't think big. Think of how can we simply service. There are enough initiatives from the so-called southbound, new southern policy of Taiwan, South Korea.
Yeah.
Why don't they engage with us?
The
Japan.
South Koreans put a new facility, I think $20 billion, if I'm not
Yes, but
mistaken.
imagine if we
The
multiply,
interest is there, obviously.
if we multiply that, or even
Yeah.
Taiwan. Why look at other countries when
We're
they've
so
always
next to you.
Yeah, and they have always attempted industrial estates in Subic.
Right.
Why don't we harness that? Or even Japan, who's the main driver of special economic zone. How can we have not? And let's have more of those things. imagine if we build that Luzon corridor, not only infrastructure based, but creating this manufacturing group side by side with the continuous growth of our service sector.
So you think there's an openness by the Filipino conglomerates
Oh,
to
yes.
getting more involved in manufacturing? Because I keep on hearing
Some
from
of them,
critics.
so they will not go into manufacturing. It's not their expertise.
And it's risky. It's very risky.
Because it's not their area. So, but they have the industrial estates.
So the foundation is there to convert just in case. Right.
Partner, I mean, or bring in
international
manufacturing group, not necessarily to partner with them, but to provide opportunities. That's why when you look at economic zones, majority of them are really owned by some of these conglomerates.
Yes.
So why don't they go into that and enter? Then when you look at ports, it's run by a conglomerate also, like ICTSI. They're ready to spend more just to bring in, if we can bring in.
What could unlock that? So from what I understand, Prof. Dindo, you're implying that it's just a matter of time, Frederick Go coming in, great people working in the government.
It's a mindset, I think. That's why I say that we need a strategic frame of mind.
Geostrategic,
and we need collectively as a nation to move that forward. That so-called investment-led job-generating growth. And I think the president knows that. That's why he had to appoint a super secretary to address this. But we need to help government by really, by also even talking about things that they don't like to talk about. That's why for me, everybody wants to talk about, everybody speaks of the problem with high cost of electricity.
Yes.
That's not the problem of power generating companies or distribution companies, because government is the one that adds on to its cost. Wala na nga tayong subsidy.
So remove the VAT or subsidize it, or couldn't be like special rates in certain areas whereby there's a tie-up so that these companies can also.
Before, some would say, let's put some power companies there, so you'll remove the transmission cost.
Right.
Let's check, but that will take some time.
Interesting.
to build those power generating plant or even renewable sources of energy. But why don't we discuss the 12% VAT?
So for you, the fiscal aspect is also very important.
Because it increases the cost. Nobody wants to enter because of that cost. They'd rather jump to Vietnam, to Malaysia, to Thailand. Next question is, because of this cost, nobody will invest, jobs are not being created, so even consumption will be affected after a while.
And to what degree is red tape a concern? I keep on hearing it, but because I raised this with even Chancellor Scholz, and I said, but it's not like Vietnam doesn't have corruption problem. We're seeing what's happening. It's not like Malaysia doesn't have corruption. I kind of have a problem with like portraying Philippines as if we're like the most corrupt, when in fact the numbers are not very clear. Yeah.
Our problem is Filipinos have a habit of putting ourselves
down. Negative exceptionalism, thinking we're always the worst in something. Just go around and see other countries.
I surprised people when I said I received a briefing in our team with Standard & Poor's saying that by 2033, we will be the top 20 economy of the world. Of course,
which we should. We're 13th largest
people are shocked. I said, why will you be shocked?
Yeah.
When we're number 33 now. People are again shocked that the Philippines is number 33 in the world in terms of economy.
It's a kind of a small country mindset, right? Na hindi tumutugma dun sa realities on the ground, right? Yeah.
So it's like, imagine that is just driven by consumption. Wala pang manufacturing base.
Exactly, yeah.
If you add that up, that's how powerful we are.
Can get the 8% growth because we're already at the 6% fastest already in the region. So we're outpacing Vietnam. The reason I'm asking this, Dindo, is I've been in conversation with people in the BPO industry who are feeling the pressure. Growth is going down, but they're still obviously the engine of growth. But they're saying one thing interesting. Sabi nila, yung mga Vietnamese realize how good we are in services, and they don't want to be just reliant on manufacturing. So they're trying to also get into services. So we should do the reverse. We should also do more manufacturing to complement our services.
And in the case of Vietnam,
right,
was there really a manufacturing base there? Or they simply opened them up to foreign investors?
And Chinese coming down very near to them. Yeah.
So again, geopolitics turned it into geoeconomic opportunities. And for me, we need to define that if there are specific investment, critical ones, we fast track it.
Yeah.
We need oil and gas, for example. Fast track it. Then the ease of doing business. The next challenge is also local. At times, I think we have addressed the issue of ease of doing business at the national level because of ARTA. But but the local government, the so-called uh, democratic process of decentralization, has created a new kingdom there
It weaponized by the oligarchs on the ground.
at the
Yeah,
ground. And for
yeah,
me, that is the more, you'd say, problem area of oligarchs more than the economy, because
yeah.
economic oligarchs, they deal with the reality of market forces now. But the political oligarchs, it's kingdom.
Insulated sila.
And nobody wants to talk about it because nobody wants to
Interesting.
be the example.
Yeah.
So imagine if we have a law. That's why for me, and we're working on this now in our institute, that we advocate uh, a green lane type, whereby if it's considered a strategic investment, even the local governments cannot interfere if not they're violating this law.
Interesting.
Then you weaponize this law to counter this government, which is basically the special economic zone theory. That
Right.
when they enter this eco zone, you don't interfere
Yeah.
anymore. And
It's
that,
a matter of national economic
yes,
interest.
and
Yeah.
that's what we need at times. That's why I say it's strategic. It takes that kind of thinking.
Mm.
That Marcos might benefit from it in the last 2 years of his government, but if institutionalized,
Right. For
then
the long term.
that's a better legacy for him, especially side by side with the legacy on strong position on the West Philippine Sea and asserting our rights. So for me, that's why I'm quite positive that he will come out stronger as they learn from their first 2 years in office.
And do you see the the economic czar or NEDA who's going to drive this
I
strategy?
think it takes a collective department. They have their own role to
Interagency.
play. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why the presence of a special assistant that can coordinate things,
NEDA, DOF.
yeah,
and the
like
rest.
like DOF on its part, we see it's a Secretary of Finance that is more politically astute, so
Right.
concerned with
And who serve
the
as NEDA
constituency.
also. Yeah.
And then you have Secretary Balisacan, who has been there and basically is building onto what he has experienced through the years also. Then you put in uh, a secretary of investments that focuses on generating support coming from this department. What we now need is a Department of Trade and Industry and our attaches out there to really be aggressive. But when
With the
Mark,
DFA, no? Just like
the DFA
DFAT,
can play a role because they are the ones that normally engages with these countries with the president. Then with a strong tandem with the Department of Trade and Industry, especially at the investment level, leave the consumer protection to some officers, but trade industry should be focused on really investment that will
Right.
generate jobs, because in the end, that's the best legacy an administration can leave. No, let's stop emphasizing how unemployment is low when you see underemployment growing. For me,
Yes.
I prefer to talk about investment that creates jobs.
Now let's connect it to the last part of our discussion, to the two Cold Wars. On one hand, the US-China competition. Speaking of geoeconomics and geopolitics, do you think that the risking from China should be a way forward, or maybe we'll try to find an understanding equilibrium in the West Philippine Sea that allows us to have a more, I would say, mutually beneficial
If I'll
interface
view
with
it
China?
economically,
Mm.
there's no need to de-risk from China.
Because they're not much here anyway.
Yes.
But in the mining sector, they have been quite active. In my region, Cordilleras, I've been hearing about a lot of Chinese.
Extracting our resources.
Exactly. So when I say the risk, maybe,
but not, is it good for us that they're extracting our
Mm.
resources? And if you've noticed, they're extracting it from smaller mining companies. I'd rather we can have bigger investments on mining, extraction of nickel, extraction of from big players, so we can have value added by transforming it, or maybe working with Japan in terms of processing and having the Western nations to buy it, because these are countries that we share our values.
Yeah.
Why beef up a country that threatens our own sovereignty? I find that wrong, really.
Yeah.
But that's a reality when you're simply driven by profit, or when our own government policy does not incorporate the geoeconomic or political side. But what I'm seeing is more than China, US competing, but China against the rest of the world that share our values. We believe on democratic values, we believe on a rules-based order, and within that rules-based order defines also our own economic order. And when you look at data coming from our own government, especially trade, I add the word beneficial. I don't look at China as a trading partner when we import so much from them and we get like that's not trade.
They earn more from us than we
Yes.
from them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's I like to add the word beneficial. And you see there, Japan, followed by the US, followed by EU as a single community.
Right.
And for me, why don't we engage with these three areas more? No? And with Japan, add South Korea, add Australia, with the US, add Canada. That's enough economic engagement already for us. Then when you look at investments, it's the same thing. It's beneficial. It's Japan, the US, the US. I find it people say, "Oh, Singapore," but Singapore record is based also on multinationals
Right.
based in
It's
Singapore.
it's a transit point.
Yeah,
for,
not
for international sales.
necessarily.
Yeah.
But when you ask yourself, when our office or our institute checked it, 0.92% as of 2022 of our investment came from China. 0.92.
Yeah.
So for me, we are not de-risking. But I'd like to use the word de-risking as the world de-risk from China.
We can be the alternative.
Yes,
Right.
we can be that
Or
opportunity.
even the risking from China in the case of Taiwan, because it's threatened by
Yes.
China. I call it Taiwan +1.
Yes.
Why not come here in the Philippines, do more
Yeah, so I think
semiconductors?
we also need.
Mm.
There used to be a time that our own Department of Trade and Industry was allowed to engage with Taiwan
Right.
instead of limiting it to MECO, our Manila Economic Operation. Maybe we should bring that back.
Should we put a competent person in charge of MECO? Because I notice a lot of ex-official,
That's the
ex-business.
problem
No
with-
offense to them,
yeah.
but you need a high-level person in charge. there.
Before, I
Yeah.
think during the time of Aquino, at least it was a career trade attaché. Ambassador
Right.
Tony
So knows how to
Masilio.
navigate.
Yeah. Now it's of course, there will also be a chairman.
Yeah.
Might be political, but the ambassador should be given to somebody who knows trade.
And navigate the One China
Yeah.
policy by bringing stable
Yes.
investments. Yeah.
Of course, even Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo did that also, having a competent person there. Make the chairman political, but the one that runs it. But aside from that also is how do we harness Japan also? We have not maximized. How can we engage more with Japan? And we do this 2+2. Let's add economic discussion along.
Right.
Maybe it's time to review GPEPA. How can we manage that more? Use EU as an opportunity, this negotiation to open
FTA.
up FTA.
Yeah.
Then harness them more.
Americans, medyo
Oh,
malabo. FTA.
with Americans, because we fail to realize, majority of our multinationals are Americans, but we don't count them because they've been around here already.
Take
but
for granted.
we take for granted that in our consumer business, a lot of them are Americans. Everybody uses Johnson's, Johnson and Johnson, Coca-Cola.
So, are you implying that we just don't need China? Is that what
Oh
you're
yes,
saying?
I've been saying that. You know why? That has been my argument.
That's a very you don't hear that anywhere in Southeast Asia. Everyone's talking about how to bring in BYD. I don't know, bring the ant and the jackmas and those kinds of digital investments, etc.
Me, I'm not against China per se, but when you have your own nation being threatened by this country.
But so is Vietnam, so is Malaysia, but they still bring in Chinese investments. So what is the difference with us?
With us is that are they harassing? Because we're the only ones who has possessed the legal document.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's
and only U.S. treaty ally also.
Was treaty ally, and the legal document, the treaty ally, has led to other strategic partnership. So, I think our own assertion made us a target of China, and indirectly also, our own assertion against China is becoming a test to this U.S. and their like-minded allies and partners to, will you really stand up with the Philippines? So we're caught in that. But the reality of data tells us that we can be really a country that addresses or stands up for our own national interests. And our national interest means disengaging with China and engaging more with countries and see that alternative. So I view it that way because as early as 2012, 2013, when we filed the case in the arbitral court, people say our economy will suffer. Our economy did not suffer because it's not tied up to China as compared to the countries our
I
neighbors.
mentioned.
That's why
Although we
for me,
import a lot from China, so they still benefit from us.
they
And
benefit
some
from
of the
us.
conglomerates here, yeah.
Yeah, so they can sell all over the country in different malls and
Yeah.
everything, different levels of mall. But is that what we need? I always tell people.
Yeah.
For me, it's really about what do we need as a nation, and it shows that our data reflects that 5% of Filipinos only believe that we should engage with China. That's down from 20% 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So there's that negativity towards China. So why don't we turn this situation, again, as I've said, into a geo-economic opportunity?
To create
As the world
coherence.
de-risk,
Yeah.
as we hear of deglobalization, but we know deglobalization creates another form of globalization. But we should not stop ourselves from real investors from China.
Really.
When
Not
I say
Pogo,
not
not
Pogo. That's what I'm saying. I have nothing against China. Like if Ant Financial
Yeah,
or
or
Alibaba or
BYD
BYD can create better
jobs.
products, why
Why
not?
not?
Right?
Exactly.
But if they are Pogos or state agencies that will circumvent our rules just to get product or projects that government like Duterte will call ODA, but actual loans,
Yeah.
we don't need that kind
Or
of
empty pledges,
or
pledge
empty pledge.
trap.
Yeah.
That in exchange they would want us to soften on West Philippines Sea when in fact nothing is coming
Yes,
in. That's what we don't
our
want.
institute have raised issues like it could lead to economic coercion because these are what we call corrosive capital. It corrodes your own
Right.
investment environment
Yeah.
because they will control
It
you.
crowds out the
Yeah.
good ones.
Then you're indebted. I remember when we started talking about critical infrastructure, people were telling me or attacking me and in a friendly way. They're in some debates. They said, Dindo, you're catering to the conglomerates. No, I'm not.
Interesting.
I've said I'm protecting our critical infrastructure because for me, Dito Telco nearly became the backdoor for China Telco to enter. For me, you spend, you don't go through the back channel. I mean,
Yeah.
PLDT Smart has NTT Docomo, so we're not being
Right.
anti-foreign. Globe has its Singtel, so we're not anti-foreign. It's just that we don't
But the
like
right kind of
right kind of investment.
tie-ups, yeah.
Or when we started looking at Kaliwa Dam, and on the other side, Wawa Dam is being done by prime infrastructure with no cost to the Filipino taxpayers, you see the difference.
Right.
So those for me are things that we should consider. That are they really here to help us economically? We all can earn together, we all can grow together. But there are Chinese companies that will benefit us, and that would be good if properly, they're part of the marketplace, not really being dictated upon us to projects. And we have to remind ourselves, who did that to us? It's a former government, former Duterte administration, who was appeasing China, who nearly gave us all these projects that could have indebted us, with China's interest in mind, not the interest of the Filipino people and the Filipino nation.
And that's the other thing that makes the Philippines exceptional, right? That China perhaps wants to leverage some of their friends in the Philippines, and their friends happen to be, at least until recently, part of the ruling coalition. One of them is a breath away from the
Yes.
highest office. This is the last part of our conversation for that. We're heading into midterm elections soon, but as early as right now, you hear things about potential impeachment moves against Sara Duterte as she positions herself as a leader of opposition. Even some conversations about whether ICC or Interpol will come into the picture by September, just before elections. There's a Quadcom or Supra committee of 4 different committees in Congress
Yes.
investigating everything. Is this the perfect storm against the Dutertes, or this is just going to make the upcoming midterm elections more contentious and more high stakes for the Marcos administration?
I think it is high stakes for both. It's a matter of survival for the Dutertes.
Right.
For the Marcoses, it can define their last 3 years. They come out strong with all these initiatives by their allies or coalition partners, and the public favors them over the other, and that's what Okta research tells us, that they're down to less than 20%. The support
16%, yeah,
for-
from
for-
20, 21%.
from Duterte, but I think both of them are fighting for that 40%
Yeah,
undecided.
which is still up in the air.
Up in the
yeah,
air.
yeah.
What I see is that all the things being raised by this quad committee were actually raised by people who were against Duterte then.
Trillanes, no? Trillanes, very much openly, yeah.
Before, that's even the late Chito Gascon, Commission on Human
Right,
Rights.
of
We're raising
course.
all these things. So for me, I'm happy that it's being discussed. If ICC moves forward, it's also good to understand that no president in the Philippines can just set aside the basic human rights of our people. And if they need to be made accountable here, I don't think we're surrendering our sovereignty. Uh, if we need the international community to make people accountable, we should. If that's a big if there's really enough basis
Right.
for that. So it's really
But is it important too, in a sense of, because in the West Philippine Sea, we want to leverage international law and rule of law. So you have to be consistent. You cannot say, oh, we want international legal support on West Philippine Sea. And then when it comes to human rights and political issues,
That's
oh,
why-
no, we don't want interference. You cannot play that.
that's why me
You cannot pick and choose.
I've always believed that the world today has grown even with all its challenges because of the international rules-based order in different levels, even
Yeah.
trade, even in investment. So, and our strength right now, as a small country, as some Filipinos would like to portray our nation, but me, no. We are as strong as the bigger ones based on international law. If
Right.
we have that argument, which led us to this strong position strategically now, at the geopolitical level, we cannot set aside the respect for international human rights law. And I believe there's a role for ICCs. No? And you have to give credit to Filipinos who built that case.
Right.
Different religious personalities who built that case, coming from victims of the family. We should not forget them. And if we need the international community, I hope the Filipino public realizes you wouldn't like this to have been done to your family, no matter how
Yeah.
not perfect your family member is. No? And if this was really about fighting criminality, what did we really bring down?
Yeah.
So now that will define, I think, all these issues that we will be expecting as we enter a more political season can really define the presidency, but also can neutralize a former strong family name, but also tells us also what matters to us as a nation, as a people. What are the choices that we will make? I think we are in this situation now. Can we all work together and build on what Marcos has started? Private sector interested, international community supportive of Marcos, and collectively work together? Or should we be brought into this divisiveness of being driven by certain groups because they lost political power, and with political power, lost access to political resources also.
Naging opposition lang dahil nawalan ng position or hindi nakuha yung gusto
So,
position,
yun nga,
right?
diba?
Yeah.
So, do we deserve that? Or do we serve a better option for the Filipino people? So it's something. It's a crossroad for us. And if we turn this again, I go to the word strategic. It means we go beyond the little politics that we have here and see ourselves playing a more important role in the region. Maybe we can really attain that 2033 top 20 in the world and see that if we work together as a nation, generate interest, both public, private, international, maybe we can uplift our people.
On that note of wisdom and inspiration, Professor Dindo, I know there's so much to discuss. We hope to get back to you in the coming months as the election season comes in. I know you're going to be very busy, but you're definitely one of the top minds in the country when it comes to understanding
Thank
also
you.
the domestic landscape. But I really appreciate this discussion because it's really about geoeconomics and geopolitics coming together. It's about making sure the Philippines makes the most out of this era of some challenges, but also a lot of opportunities. Thank you
We have
very
to be
much,
that way.
Professor
Thank you.
Dindo.
Thank you for this time and opportunity.
Salamat. Catch us again next week here on One News. You can also check out the long conversation on YouTube, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. I'm Richard Haydarian, and that was The View from Manila. We're One News, all sides, all the time.